In this video we are going to take a closer look at the freshly released Warzone Octarius FAQ and its impact on the new Deathwatch Army of Renown, the Kill Team Strike Force. Over the course of the video we will first look at what exactly changed with the FAQ and how it affects lists that we have already seen in competitive play. In the second part we will then discuss what has not been addressed by the FAQ and what more might be in store for us with the upcoming Chapter Approved 2022 around the corner.
Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer and I will be guiding you through this video.
Before we get started, a quick reminder that I have done a full review of the Kill Team Strike Force a few weeks ago. If you are not yet familiar with how this Army of Renown for Deathwatch works, I recommend checking out the video linked in the description. Without further delay, let's have a look at what changed. Good news first. With an update to the crusade rules, the FAQ clarifies that the Army of Renown can indeed be played as a crusade force. The problem here was basically that the mandatory specialism for the kill teams would prevent them from being added, but this has always struck me as an obvious oversight, and it is great to have this spelled out accordingly. Moving on to the actual FAQ part, there are two entries of interest here. First, the Veterans of the Long Vigil ability requires an army-wide selection of a chapter tactic. It's not something to be picked per unit. I think that this was generally being agreed on anyway, but still, the wording was a little confusing and it's great to have it clarified. Then the last and certainly most impactful one is the clarification for the Honored Veteran of the Watch Stratagem. This is the one that allows a Sergeant model to pick a warlord trait. Unfortunately, the FAQ clarifies that these benefits apply only to the Sergeant, not the whole kill team, and that this can in some instances mean that for as long as models other than the Sergeant are still alive, some parts may not take effect. They even provide a few specific examples, like Stealth Adept, which would have made a Spectre's kill team untargetable, or Imperium Sword, which would have allowed the whole kill team to reroll the charge roll, Speed of the Primarch would have allowed them to fight first, and Oathkeeper would have given them a heroic intervention on steroids. Now, this is a bit unfortunate, but given the sheer amount of warlord traits available, especially with Paragon of their chapter added into the mix, it is no surprise that they reined this one in. In a previous video, I mentioned Michael Costello and his success at the FactoruM GT with the new Army of Renown. Since then, he has brought the same list to the big Leicester Super Major, where he went 4-1 and ended on an amazing rank 14 out of over 300 players. While he ran what can only be described as the Army of Renown iteration of his previous infantry heavy tournament lists, what struck me as incredibly bold was the inclusion of Speed of the Primarch on one of his Proteus kill teams. I have also mentioned this in my original review. As far as I'm concerned, it was by no means obvious, based on the wording alone, that the benefits would apply to the whole kill team. However, from what I've heard, he argued a solid case based on examples found in other factions, and the TOs allowed it to be played as such. Such a ruling at a super major would have made a perfect reference case for future usage of the stratagem. Unfortunately, from a Deathwatch perspective, the FAQ has now stated otherwise. This means that the application of the stratagem will now likely shift to aura effects or more defensive applications such as Iron Resolve. With the actual changes out of the way, let's have a look what did not get addressed. First, and what I consider the most controversial topic by far, is the Specialism Extremis stratagem and flamer weapons. The wording of the stratagem is as following. Each time a model in that unit makes an attack, a successful hit roll automatically wounds the target. Flamers auto-hit. Therefore, the question is whether they qualify for this or not. On one side of the argument, some say that auto-hitting weapons do not make any hit rolls, therefore the condition is not being met. This is further reinforced by some core rule about triggering additional hits. On the other side of the argument, some say that the glossary defines an auto-hit as the hit roll being successful, therefore the condition for Specialism Extremis has been met. What makes things even more complicated is that different events have come to different conclusions on this. I think we really need a lawyer and the Oxford Dictionary for this, or in absence of these, GW including this in the FAQ. Now, I don't claim to have an answer to this purely based on how the rules are written, but what I personally think is that having both auto hits and auto wounds and therefore effectively bypassing two important stages of dice rolling is too powerful, and given how conservative they ruled both the Deathwatch supplement, the Army of Renown as a whole, and now the Sergeant Stratagem in particular, I just find it highly unlikely that they would be so generous with Specialism Extremis. Personally, I would not play it that way unless a specific event announced it otherwise prior to submitting the lists, in which case I would not want to unnecessarily impair myself when compared to the other Deathwatch players. Either way, this is just my opinion, guys. I do believe that this needs an FAQ. Until then, make sure to check with the TO prior to an event if possible. Moving on to my second point, specialisms and their interaction within the Army of Renown. Returning to the previously mentioned Specialism Extremis stratagem, this one is usable against any battlefield roll with the Aquila specialism, but requires a matching battlefield roll for all the others. This makes the Aquila specialism both the cheapest and best specialism. Furthermore, thus the replacing of Xenos Hunters with another chapter tactic still allow full rerolls when targeting a matching battlefield roll with one of the battlefield roll specific specialisms. For instance, if we selected Dominatus, can we still do full rerolls against elites even though we picked another chapter tactic through Veterans of the Long Vigil? Depending on how this is being ruled, it significantly impacts the tax we pay for the mandatory specialisms and also how useful the unique warlord trait of the Army of Renown truly is. As it currently stands, I think that the Army of Renown is a match for the Dreadnought lists. The recent success by Michael Costello certainly reinforces that point. I also think that we can take the small dent that the FAQ put into the army with the new ruling of the stratagem for the sergeant. It sounded a bit too good to be true. Along those same lines, I don't think that flamers and Specialism Extremis should be a thing, or even have to be a thing in order to make the army competitive. However, I wonder how many more FAQs in our disfavor can the Army of Renown take before it becomes too much. As far as I'm concerned, the whole deal with specialisms, the way they work, the way they are costed, and the way they are forced into the Army of Renown is a huge mess that needs an overhaul at its core. Are we likely to see it in 9th edition? I highly doubt it. With that being said, what further can we expect that would work in favor of the new Army of Renown? One thing that comes to mind is the upcoming chapter approved 2022. Changes to secondary objectives have already been previewed, and among other things, they make life a little harder for so-called action monkeys, which is something that the Army of Renown struggles with. For instance, with the upcoming chapter approved, deploy teleport homers can be completed at the end of your own turn by the troops battlefield roll, with the Deathwatch has plenty of. Furthermore, the new version of Retrieve Octarius data now requires a dice roll below or equal the number of models in order to succeed, with once more a bonus to the troops battlefield roll, while punishing characters and/or super small squads. This works in favor of Deathwatch in general, and particularly the Army of Renown, which of course also has access to the optimized priority warlord trait, perhaps even something to take on a sergeant through the previously mentioned unique stratagem for the kill team strike force. All that aside, we can of course still hope that the FactoruM field manual will come with some points adjustments that work in favor of Deathwatch, for instance points reductions for datasheets that can be included in the kill teams. All in all, I think that the Army of Renown has already proven its worth in the short time that it has been out, and the first FAQ has done nothing to stop its success. However, there are still questions left unanswered as far as I'm concerned. To wrap things up, over the course of the video, we have taken a look at the changes to the Army of Renown featured in the first Warzone Octarius FAQ. On the bright side of things, crusade rules have been fixed and veterans of the Long Vigil has been confirmed to work army-wide rather than for each unit. Perhaps a bit unfortunate, though not unsurprisingly, the FAQ further clarifies that the honored veteran of the watch stratagem, which can be applied to a sergeant in a kill team, basically gives its benefits only to the sergeant itself if those benefits are specific to the warlord. This also means that for some warlord traits, some benefits can only come into effect when the sergeant is the only one left alive, which makes this stratagem far more niche than if it worked for the whole kill team. Those actual changes aside, what has not been clarified further are the Specialism Extremis stratagem and flamers, or certain interactions between the Specialisms and the Army of Renown itself. Personally, I think the matter of Specialisms remains an unaddressed issue for Deathwatch as a whole that could do with an overhaul. Beyond Warzone Octarius, I think that the upcoming changes to secondary objectives in Chapter Approved 2022 actually work in favor of the Army of Renown, though I would love to see some points decreases for datasheets included into the kill teams. This would boost the army overall. All in all, it's great to see that the kill team strike force is on the way to success, as recent tournament results have already demonstrated, and so far the FAQ has done nothing to stop that. So that's it for the release of the Warzone Octarius FAQ and its potential impact on the kill team strike force. How do you guys rate these changes, and how do you think that it will affect the Deathwatch? Any changes you're doing to your lists? Let me know in the comments. Finally, I would also like to mention that there is a SwissHammer Facebook page where I will be posting links to my videos as well as articles I find of interest. I do read a lot about the hobby, but not all of it will always end up as its own video. I look forward to seeing you there as well. I do also have a Patreon page. If you like my content, any additional support is greatly appreciated as it helps me invest into future videos. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. I hope you have been enjoying this video. Give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again and see you next time.